Welcome to another exciting show, Comic Book Straight Talk. I'm Terry the French Tickler French.
Captain Dalian.
This is Eric the Knucklehead Eaton, and we've got a special guest with us.
Mike Redmond from Oklahoma City.
We won't give Mike a nickname. This show we're going to do a little more in-depth. Mr. Redmond, you are quite familiar with the two companies, CGC and CBCS. What can you do with those companies?
Well, I'm a member dealer. My actual company name is Mike's Marbles LLC. I'm actually listed on the CGC chat boards. If you look under dealers, you'll find my name in there. I've been a member dealer for CGC for about 4 or 5 years now, and a member dealer for CBCS for about 2 years. And basically what I do is I sit down with customers. I don't have a brick and mortar store. I basically just sit down with customers at my home in Oklahoma City, and we review their comic books and determine. I use the GPA website, which tracks sales of only CGC comics from about 7 or 8 different venues. And I sit down with the people and try to determine, if they bring me 20 comic books, should we go ahead and send 10 of them in? And I'll look at each individual comic to determine whether the grade makes it warranted that we should go ahead and submit that comic. Now, some people, they want to submit their comics strictly because they want to just have it encased and protected. And then other people, they want to have their comics graded because it does typically raise the value of the comics. So we'll make those decisions, go ahead and get all the forms filled out. I don't charge a fee for that service because I get a credit from CGC whenever I submit books. It's a little different with CBCS because they don't actually give an official credit to member dealers like myself. They usually go ahead and ask you to go ahead and submit the books at your dealer rate. So you're kind of telling the customer they have to pay the full rate, and then I get a discounted rate for submitting directly through my LLC.
Okay, and that's kind of like your kickback from the company.
Yeah, that's what makes it worthwhile to me. That's why I don't charge a fee to people, to sit down and take my time to go ahead and submit all the books. I go ahead and get that credit from them. So that makes it worthwhile for me. That way, if I build up a credit at CGC at a later date, I can go ahead and submit some of my own books, basically at no charge to myself.
Okay, very cool. Between the two companies, is there a company you prefer?
CGC has been around longer. They've been around since 2000, 2002. CBCS just started about 2 years ago, but a lot of the people who run CBCS used to work for CGC. Steve Borak is the president of CBCS, and he used to be the primary grader at CGC, and I believe he helped start CGC as well. I'm willing to represent both CGC and CBCS because they're both good companies. They're very ethical. They try to do things the correct way. Each company tends to get bogged down, especially during Comic-Con season, which basically runs from April to October. The turnaround times for getting stuff graded tends to get way too long. And a lot of times that's what when I originally sit down and talk to people about getting their comics submitted for grading, I ask them whether they're going to go ahead and plan on keeping the comics after they submit them or whether they want to go ahead and sell them afterwards. Because in a lot of cases, it merits paying the fast track or fast pass fee at either company so you get the comic books back faster. The fast track at CGC and the fast pass at CBCS is basically an expedition fee. And I believe for each company, it's an extra $10 per comic to have those comics expedited.
Now, should people ever worry about when they submit their books, if they have a really high-end book? Through other companies like PGX, I've seen some horror stories as far as, first printings getting traded out for a third printing. Do you ever see anything like that? And I did see another on CGC where a guy submitted a Hulk 182 and was sent back a Hulk 181,
Nice fair trade.
which
Yeah, that's a good trade.
CGC, I guess, evidently contacted him and asked him to send it back, and they'd make it right. Do you ever see anything like that?
No, I haven't personally seen that problem. And, a lot of people have a lot of expensive comic books. And I believe I have a reputation now of being completely honest with people. You don't have to worry about giving your books to me. I'm not going to keep your books. So I'm not going to try to sell your books. Your books go to CGC. When you give me the comic books to have them graded, you only pay me $10, which is my actual shipping cost to either CGC or CBCS down in Florida to package and ship the comics to them. Whenever you give me comics to submit for grading, I make cardboard sandwiches with oversized cardboard. I tape all 4 sides. All of the comics are bubble wrapped, bubble wrap around them, and then I put them in a big enough box to where I fill the empty space with foam peanuts or newspaper or something else. So there's no shifting of your comics in the box when it goes to Florida. I typically ship priority mail box, whether it be like a regional rate A box or B box or just a standard flat rate medium rate priority mail box to ship them down there. So if you give me a comic that you want to have graded, I'll give you 100% assurance that you're going to get that same comic back from CGC or CBCS.
Now, when someone submits a comic to you, do you give them any kind of insurance as far as what if their comic gets damaged, or do you provide anything like that, or is it kind of upon them to purchase insurance through the post office or CGC or anything like that?
I was going to dovetail that.
Yeah.
Could they say, when you say $10, what if I give you, 15, couldn't you put the extra to insurance, something like that? I mean, is that something they could do?
Yeah, my actual cost, I've got this memorized. If I put, let's say somebody gives me 3 or 4 comic books, by the time I'm done all wrapping and everything, I can fit all that into a regional rate A box, which costs me exactly $9.92 to ship to either company in Florida.
So the 8 cents extra, you're keeping that.
Yeah,
you're paying yourself.
I'm making a whole 8 cents profit on
I guess that'll work.
$10 that you give me.
I guess that'll work. Now, do you ever give an estimation on grade?
Like when you sit down with the people.
When you're discussing, showing the books.
Well, let me finish your
Yeah, we didn't get your
Yeah, let's get the insurance question here.
Insurance. Back to insurance.
If somebody wanted to give me a little extra money and they wanted to pay extra for the insurance, I'm fine with that. I'll just tell them to insure it for a certain amount of money. Otherwise, I'm shipping it down there and it's only covered with the standard $50 of insurance that the post office gives you for priority mail.
Okay, cool.
Now,
So basically you're gonna want to purchase, if you want to, you're gonna have to purchase the insurance, some extra insurance yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously not going to cover the insurance
Yeah.
for you. I'm not going to take $10 and have it cost me $20 to ship them down there. So, yeah, I mean, it's up to the customer to basically, I'll either bring it up or it's probably, if they want to raise the question of insurance. If you want to send in $1,000 book, I would definitely recommend paying extra for the insurance.
Now, back to my question. Do you ever give kind of an estimation as far as when you look over the book, you ever go, I strongly believe you'll get this back in 8 and 8.5?
Actually, I try to do that with every book a customer submits because I want them to be comfortable with the idea of, let's say they give me a comic book and I think it's an 8.5. I'll then look that particular comic book up on GPA to see what an 8.5 is sold for in the past. On modern comics, because the grading fee starts at $18, I recommend to people that unless the comic sells for at least $50 or more after grading, don't even mess with having them graded.
Okay.
It'd be better if it was like $100 or so. But kind of lost my train of thought on that one.
Well, also when they show you the comics, something that's becoming more and more popular and more kind of commonplace is pressing. and even some dry cleaning. Do you ever suggest that to people to try to maximize the grade they can get out of their book?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, there's a few local people in Oklahoma City who do pressing. I know a few other guys who press comic books in Cincinnati. There's another guy in Lake Mary, Florida. There are a number of guys out there who press comic books. And for those of you who don't exactly know what pressing a comic book is or does, they basically use a shirt press, a small shirt press, to press the comics to remove flaws like finger bends, edge bends, dimpling a lot of times if it's not, directly water related. One thing pressing will not do is remove color breaking creases. If you have 2 or 3 short color breaking creases along the spine, it may flatten out those creases, but it's obviously not going to add the color back to the comic. So it's still going to be a defect. It's still going to reduce the grade of the comic, but if you have it pressed, it won't be as severe as if you didn't have it pressed.
So if it's flat and still has the color break, it will grade better than something not flat with the same color break?
Exactly.
Okay.
And another thing, there is comic restoration. A lot of times, and I will admit myself that I'm not the best restoration detective in the world. There's color touch, there's tear seals, there's a lot of other things that people can do or will do to make a comic book look better. But CGC and CBCS both have their methods of detecting restoration. Once the book gets down there, as a matter of fact, I've got a guy in Oklahoma City who submitted 2 books recently. He doesn't know it yet, but one of them is going to come back restored.
Oh, okay. Well, I hope he doesn't listen to Comic Book Straight Talk.
Hey, guess what?
Now, if one of them does come back restored, can you be contacted first from CGC as far as if you want to go ahead and get it encapsulated?
Typically not. They go ahead. I have had cases where I've submitted some of my own comics, and the edge corners got bent during shipment, and they did call me back and said, do you want us to go ahead and grade these comics? Do you want them sent back? So they'll just basically hold them in reserve, and they'll send the raw comics back while the rest of them get graded.
Now, I think, does CBCS have a deal that you can, if it's like, if it's not a certain grade, they won't grade it after they look it over?
Yeah, there are various things. You pay an extra, I think, $2 or $3 per book or something like that. And you have to submit a minimum of it used to be 40, 50 books. I'm not exactly up to date on what that amount is, but they do have a service where you can specify that all of the books, especially like on moderns, you can say unless it's going to grade 9.6 or higher, don't grade it at all.
Okay.
So you're basically paying them a small fee just to look over the comic to determine whether or not it will meet that 9.6 or higher grade.
And will that save you any money if they don't go ahead and finish the completion of grading it?
It could, in that instead of you paying $18 a book, you're paying $2 or $3 just to have them tell you that it's not worth being graded, and that's basically up to the customer. You're going to determine ahead of time what those comics are worth. And if you want to go ahead and specify a certain grade or higher, then it's going to be worth your while. But it's kind of like you as the customer trying to determine if it's 9.6 or higher. Yeah, I want to grade it. If it's 9.4 or lower, no, it's not worth grading. So you're kind of doing the same thing that I do with the customer ahead of time. It's just you're doing it yourself before you and I even get together.
Okay, that's pretty nice. Now, with so many people using CGC and CBCS and even PGX, and there's Halo and what's that?
People still use PGX?
There's 3 people, I think.
Does Vault still exist?
I think so.
Still exists.
Do you think that overall will hurt comic book market? Because it does like you said, typically bring more money if your comic is graded, but then you start grading all these keys and then minor keys and semi keys, and some of these comics go from where they were attainable to where, now it's taken about 3 months paychecks to buy the book versus before it was maybe a month paychecks. Do you think it'll hurt the market long term, where it'll just be an oversaturation of graded comics?
There's been, that's kind of like two sides of the coin. There's a lot of people who absolutely hate graded comics. For number one, you actually can't read the comic. They say it's entombed in a plastic case.
Do people actually buy comics and read them anymore? No.
Actually, there are a lot of people who just totally disdain graded comics, and then there are other people who they say have really that's the existence of CGC and now CBCS and Vault and PGX, even though the other companies have their problems, and that's why I don't represent them. A lot of people feel it has actually promoted the comic book industry. Sometimes in good ways, sometimes in bad. A lot of people feel that getting comics now, that the comic itself is not really appreciated that much. That it's more of just about the money you can get out of the comics after you get them graded and sell them.
Right.
But again, that's each person's individual responsibility. And it's up to you as an individual to determine. Are you having a comic graded to protect it? Or are you having it just preserved so it maintains that grade over a long period of time? Maybe you pass them down to your kids, or are you going to turn around and sell it?
Okay.
And to kind of piggyback on his question, and it's one that we kind of posed on several shows back, is say 50, 60 years from now, which is going to, and talking about the oversaturation of like Hulk 181s and 8.0s to 9.8s, not all those. Do you think since there's going to be such an oversaturation of the higher graded copies that the ungraded will be more sought after since it'll be more pure?
It's possible. There are certain books, like you mentioned, like Hulk 181, Batman Adventures 12, Amazing Spider-Man 129. Even though there are more and more copies graded year after year after year, the value on them keeps going up. There's just I think there's always going to be certain comics that do that. Then there's other comics that, let's throw an example out. Let's just say, Amazing Spider-Man 500, for example. The more 9.8 copies get graded, odds are the value of that comic graded is going to go down. It's kind of like a supply and demand. If you have a particular comic out there and there's only 2 9.8 copies in existence, and there's a bunch of 9.6s or 9.4s, those 2 9.8 copies are going to be very desirable and they're going to keep their value.
Now, we know you set up at different conventions as well. When you set up at conventions, do you primarily do it as a CGC, CBCS dealer, or do you do it as a comic book dealer, or both?
Actually, both. I've been mostly a comic collector since 2002, so about 14, almost 15 years now. I've been a member dealer for CGC and CBCS, like I said, for 2 to 4 years. But I can do both. I'll sit there, whether it be a collector con or another Comic-Con in Dallas or Wichita or Tulsa or Oklahoma City. I'm a comic seller myself, a comic dealer. I'm also a collector. I have my own big Marvel collection that I have at home. But I'll go ahead and represent CGC and CBCS at these shows as well. So if somebody wants to come up to me at any show I do, I've always got the CGC and CBCS forms with me, so they can go ahead and submit their comics at the shows too. There was one guy at the last Collector Con who gave me 2 copies of Amazing Spider-Man 300. They were both just graded and shipped to him. So I don't remember how long it's been since the last Collector Con.
March? No, August. August.
Yeah. So it hasn't been that long, and I believe he did pay for Fast Track, so he got those back fairly quickly. But
now, were you pretty close on grade estimation?
Well, this particular submission, I remember that both of both copies of Amazing Spider-Man 300 looked really, really nice, and I believe the grades he got on them are only like an 8.5 or a 9.0.
Oh.
That's one thing that you're going to find with CGC and CBCS both, is that a lot of times, even though both I and you as the customer think that a book might be a 9.4, 9.6, 9.8, a lot of times their grading is so tight that you're gonna, I've been disappointed personally, even as a dealer, with a lot of the books that I've submitted. So a lot of times you're gonna be really happy because they're graded so high, and other times you're gonna be disappointed because the grades don't come back near what you thought or I thought it was gonna be.
Now, do they have a grade like Overstreet has a grading guide? Does CGC have a grading guide, and CBCS have a grading guide?
And do they follow the Overstreet? That's been the standard for.
Yeah, and I thought about that before I came over here. I think I have a second edition of the Overstreet comic book grading guide, and it's been a while since I read through it. I don't know if the grading companies actually strictly adhere to that, or whether they've even set their own standards, maybe even a little bit higher than what the Overstreet grading guide gives you. And for those of you who are unaware, Overstreet does make, you've got the Overstreet comic book price guide, which they issue every year right around San Diego Comic-Con time. But they also make a comic book grading guide, which I would definitely recommend that everybody have a copy of that. And it'll give you specific examples of what a 9.8 is, or what a 6.0 is, or what a 2.0 is. And the more and more graded comics you look at, the better you get at being able to grade yourself. Like I said, I literally didn't own a comic book for 30 years. And then way back in early 2002, I started buying again. I probably bought well over 100,000 comics since then. Not close to the 2 million that you've bought. But anyway, it's a kind of I lost track on that one too. But
with the grading system, the way I've heard it is every book starts at a 10, and 3 different people grade it, and then they kind of have a consensus between the 3.
I think the way it actually works is you have 2 kind of just regular graders, and they each give the book a grade, and then those 2 people pass their grades on to the senior grader. And if the senior grader agrees with one or the other of the 2, then that's the grade that the book actually gets. So you've got I know that's the way it is at CGC. I'm not sure about CBCS. But let's say you send in a book and one of the graders gives it a 9.2 and the other grader gives it a 9.4, but then it goes to the senior grader and he agrees with the one guy that it's a 9.4, then that's the grade the book gets.
Okay.
So whether he agreed with the 9.2 grade or the 9.4 grade, that's the end grade that it would actually get.
Okay. Now, Captain Dalian on a few shows ago mentioned that when he sets up at shows, he's seen more and more people eyeball books, raw books, as far as to possibly look to have them graded, see any kind of dents. When people are looking for comics, should they pay attention more to the front and back covers over the pages? Or, if you have, really faded pages, but your front and back cover is amazing, how is that going to affect the difference between a decent front and back cover with white, ultra white pages?
Some people can be sticklers about what they will and won't buy, but typically that's where you want to start. You want to look at the front cover and you want to look at the back cover. If you find absolutely nothing wrong, no smudges, no tears, no rips, no color breaking creases, no finger bends, nothing, you just literally can't find a fault with either the front cover or the back cover, it's recommended that yes, you have to look through the comic. One thing I learned by myself through my own bad experiences is you have to do a page count of every comic you want to submit for grading. You should do a page count on every comic you have, period. You want to make sure that all the staples are attached, whether it's one staple from an old Golden Age book or two staples from a later book. You just want to make sure that the comic is complete. There's no cutouts. There's no rips inside. If anybody scribbled all over interior pages, if the cover is detached or the centerfold is detached, you want to make sure everything's complete.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not just the covers that determine the grade. It's the whole comic, the comic as a whole that they look over. And a lot of times, I think that maybe that's what happens is that as individual comic collectors, we tend to only look at the covers and spend a lot of time on those. Say, yeah, it's worth grading. But then we don't pay that much attention to the interior of the comic. And then after it gets graded and we thought that was a 9.6, it comes back a 9.0, we may learn that there was some internal defect. Now that kind of leads me to another thing I'd like to talk about is whenever you submit a comic to CGC, I do know that a lot of times they will add grader's notes.
Okay.
And when you submit a comic through me, I have a dealer page that I can refer to on the internet, and I keep track of all the submissions. So I can tell people when their submission was received, when it gets graded, when it's finally shipped. And that's another thing. You typically don't know the grade of the comic, even though my dealer page may say that the comic is graded. I can't tell, even as a dealer, I can't tell what the grade is until they mark it shipped/safe. Once the comics are shipped, then the grades of your comics will appear on there. Once the grades appear, the grader's notes also appear, where they may even, they don't get very descriptive, but they'll say stuff like, light finger bends on back cover, or two minor spine ticks on the front cover. They'll talk about things like that, and I always try to relay that information to the customers before they even get the comics. I will actually, a lot of times I'll contact most of the people who submit through me. I know them through Facebook, or I'm Facebook friends with them. So I'll either send them a Facebook message or an email and say, hey, I know the grades of your comics. Do you want to know them ahead of time, or do you want to wait and see what they are once you actually get the shipment back?
How many people want to know?
I actually find out that most people want to know what the grades are before they even get the comics back. And that's another thing I want to talk about. If you submit comics through me as a dealer or any other member dealer, the comics get shipped directly back to you. They don't get shipped back to me as a dealer, and then I have to turn around and contact you to get the comics. You actually are able to receive the comics directly from either CGC or CBCS.
Now, do you have any stories of either big upsets or big surprises when people submitted through you?
Not so much the grade as, you have, everybody, including myself, has been disappointed in the grades you get back from either of the grading companies, but most of the time it's stuff like restoration. Typically on a restored, with either CGC or CBCS, if a book is unrestored, you typically get a blue label back, no matter what grade it is. If a comic is restored, it'll get what we call the purple label of death. We call them plods. And the label itself will be purple, and they'll note the specific restoration that was done to the comic. They also have what we call the green label of death, which is their qualified label. It's like I said, it's green, and that typically covers stuff like if a cover's detached at one stable, it's not restored, but it has some kind of a defect, like it's not necessarily a manufacturing defect, but something that's happened to the comic after it was received in the public. Matter of fact, I've got some myself where you might get a high grade on it. You might get a 9.4 or 9.6 grade, but it'll still be the green label, and they'll actually state what the defect is. It could be a pop staple. It could be
maybe a missing marble stamp, something like that.
Yep, that's another good example.
There's a lot of Hulk
There's
181s
a lot
out
of
there.
missing marble stamps.
I had a Hulk 181 that graded an 8.5, and that was basically the only problem with it was it got a green label because somebody cut out the marble value stamp. And that's another thing that people really should pay attention to. There are specific things that the comic manufacturers have put into comics over the years, and in this case of the marble value stamps, we're mainly talking 1970s Bronze Age comics, where they put what was 1 through 100, I believe. There were 100 different marble value stamps.
I think the Tickler has the full set.
Yeah,
I think so.
Which he's been awfully quiet,
He has been quiet. What's wrong, Tickler?
Hey, I'm just listening.
Okay.
I'm learning something.
And jotting notes.
Yeah, I've got some questions here. So
Now,
but yeah, I've had my own bad experiences where I myself have sold comics. Of course, I learned this a long time ago, and it doesn't happen anymore. But where I've sold comics to people, and they're like, "Hey, you sold me these comics, and then marble value stamp is missing in them." And at the time, this was right after I got back into comic collecting. I did not know about the marble value stamps or anything like that. So it's definitely something you learn over time that, in the 14 years I've been back in the comic collecting and dealing, I've probably had to tighten my grading standards about 3 times.
Okay, now talking about the grading standards, I noticed on older CGC, like the old blue labels, where the lettering's real small, it had a lot of white and then the outside was blue.
The first ones.
Like the first labels.
Yep.
A lot of people will crack those and have them resubmit, and they'll come back higher. Which, like Coin Company, like CGCS, on their old labels, if you did that to coins, you got them higher. Which CGC and NGC are connected, which I don't know on the NGC older stuff if they'd come back higher. Is that just because the grading companies are becoming more lax?
I've been on the CGC chat boards for a long time. I think ever since 2007 or 2008. What was your question again?
If the grading scales and grading evaluation has become more relaxed over the years, and that's why like the older labels got lower grades because they were more strict on no, this is going to be this grade. If it's a color break crease, it can't go above a 6.5.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's if it's color break crease from natural,
right,
turning or whatever, then that's not going to count off.
Yeah, I mean, what I was alluding to was being on the CGC chat boards for a while. You hear that from time to time that at this particular time of year, CGC seems to be grading tighter than what they used to, and then maybe a year later you'll hear they seem to be grading looser than what they used to. I don't think it's intentional that they do that, but I think it's kind of cyclical in that they may, at one point of the year they may be a little tighter, another part of the year they may be a little looser on their grading standards. It should be consistent, but you still tend to hear that kind of thing that it does kind of ebb and tide from time to time.
do you think that could be like old employees leaving, new employees coming in, or could it also be just the amount of books they have to look at?
Or lead grader leaving and forming a new company?
Probably all the above. Yeah, I mean, it could be, how they say you shouldn't buy a car that was made on Monday, I think, or no, don't buy a car that's made on Friday. Because typically people are all they're thinking about is the weekend and they want to get home. So,
Okay.
Yeah, it makes
I was
sense.
kind of looking at you funny in that, and I was like, explain it. Yeah, okay.
One of the problems I've had with especially with CGC is the fact that like currently we were talking before we started the podcast about some of the turnaround times for the grading it's like typically their estimated turnaround time for a modern comic is 20 business days. Right now it's currently running 80 business days, 4 times longer than typical. And that's just because of the Comic-Con season. They get so much volume. We always tell them we'll hire more people or work overtime, but and they probably have done that. They've probably hired more people and they've worked overtime. I know Steve Warwick himself will sit there on Saturday.
Do you know how many
Great
employees they
comics.
have?
I don't know how many exact employees they have. I would love myself to take a tour of both CGC and CBCS.
They're not in just a garage?
That's
For,
PGX.
Oh, PGX is in the garage. They're the garage graders.
and for those of you who don't know, CGC is located in Sarasota, Florida, and CBCS is located in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Now, when people submit to you, they don't have to be a member, do they?
They don't have to be. That's one of the advantages you have in submitting through me is I do a lot of the footwork for you. I estimate the grade. I fill out all of the forms for you. I package the comics, get them all shipped out, maintain communication through the whole process with you.
Now, have you ever had any submissions come back like a 9.9 or a 10?
I actually have one 9.9 myself. I bought a 9.9 that was already graded. And I got a Superior Spider-Man 29 that I submitted to. It was actually my very first CBCS submission. I think I graded that, sent in like 6 or 7 books. And it was the J. Scott Campbell Black Cat cover of Superior Spider-Man 29.
So the one with her playing with the ball of yarn?
I believe so. No,
No,
not that one.
All the kittens around.
Yeah, the one with the kittens.
I know Mr. Tickler here has been looking for one of those.
But yeah, that one came back at 9.9, and I still have it.
Yeah, I've never had one come. I've bought some 9.9s, so I've never had one come back.
So say if somebody wanted to get their own membership, what's the negatives and positives, and what's the cost of getting your own membership?
I don't remember the exact cost. There are various tiers at each company. There's like a standard membership fee of I think it's like $35 or $39 with CGC to become a quote unquote collector's society member. And it used to be that they gave you like 4 free submissions. Yeah,
for the middle one, they do the 4 free. It's $150, but now it's a $150 credit for grading, but it doesn't go towards shipping.
Yeah.
It used to give you the 4 because you'd have to wait for your packet. Because if you signed up the next day, you can submit those 4 free. You had to wait for the actual coupons to come. And I noticed with those, man, when you got those coupons, it was like they were taking the front of line because you beat Fast Track and Fast Pass on them with the coupons, but now they do the credit, which the $150 one is the middle of the road tier, and I want to say you get 15% discount on grading, and then the higher up one is like 18% discount on grading. So unless you're going to grade a lot, I believe the higher up one's $300, but I would say if you're not going to grade a ton, it's probably better just do the $150.
It sounds like it's a lot of trouble with all these tiers and stuff. So I mean, why would you want to be a member yourself then?
Well, especially when you can take it to
right, exactly. I mean, it's
Mr. Redmond here.
Now, can people contact you because you do shows through different cons? Can people contact you year-round and submit through you year-round?
Yeah, you can contact me on Facebook. I have a Mike's Marbles LLC Facebook page.
Okay.
You can contact me through that. You can contact me through my normal Facebook page under my official name, Mike Redmond, Redmon.
Yeah, you have your pictures in the post office too, isn't it?
On milk cartons too.
Milk cartons in the post office.
But now you can send me an email, and that's Mike's Marbles LLC @gmail.com, or you can call me directly at 405-595-9772. And what we'll do is, if you're interested in having any comic books graded, we'll sit down, whether it takes half hour, an hour, 2 hours. We'll go through all the comics, determine what needs to be sent in, and I basically I live in Northwest Oklahoma City, so I typically meet people at my house because it's easier for them, especially when you're going to bring 10, 20 comics. It's not that difficult to bring them. And if you live, an hour away, I'll probably meet you at some midpoint. We'll sit down at a Starbucks or whatever. I've done that before, where I'll just meet people somewhere and we'll just sit down and go over everything then.
Okay. So go ahead, Kevin.
I was going to say, so it would probably, as it's been mentioned numerous times in the previous shows, I'm a huge slapstick fan. Awesome slapstick character. Now, if I wanted to get one graded, they only sell for $2 or $3.
Right.
Would it not be? That wouldn't be really worth one to get graded?
No, because of course, again, it's your personal reasons. Are you getting it graded just to have a graded copy? Are you wanting to sell it? Like me personally, I'm trying to build. I've been trying for years to complete it, but I'm trying to build a complete Journey into Mystery, the Marvel Journey into Mystery Volume 2 set, which is 1 through 19.
Oh, the Bronze Age.
The Bronze Age, the horror, the mystery, Journey into Mystery title. I've got 16 of the 19 in CGC 9.2 or higher.
Wow, that's pretty good.
And I need 3 more. I actually have 2 raw copies that I'm probably going to submit, but number 17 for some reason has eluded me in finding a real nice copy of that.
So if someone has a number 17, they'll give it to you. You'll offer them a free autograph.
Correct.
You'll be famous after this, yeah. I recently I've got 2 copies of, because we're talking about people getting stuff graded to hand down. My youngest daughter is a huge Loki fan. Doesn't care for Thor, likes Loki. And I was able to pick up a 4.0 first Loki, Journey to Mystery. And so it's on her wall.
That was number 85?
Yeah.
Yeah, Journey to Mystery 85.
Yeah, so it's graded and it's on her wall. And
So we mentioned GPA. Can you tell us a little bit more about GPA and where do they get their information from?
GPA, I call it GPA for short, but it's actually, the website is called comics.gpanalysis.com. And it's actually a guy in Australia who built this website. He, like if you or if I were to sell you a CGC comic today, he's obviously not going to know about that one. But he does track various venues like I think it's Comic Connect, Comic Link, eBay, Heritage Comic Sales. There are 7 or 8 different venues where he literally feeds all this information into a database, and it tracks sales of CGC comics only. The question has been asked, CBCS started their own chat boards a few months ago, and the question has been asked, and Steve Borak has answered that CBCS is actually going to have their own GPA type website where they track sales of only CBCS comics. Because that's another question I get asked all the time is, what sells better? If I had a Hulk 181 in CGC 8.0 and I had a Hulk 181 in CBCS 8.0, does either one sell for more money? I did my own little kind of survey on that a few months ago, and typically find that's not set in stone, it's not ingrained. I've seen a lot of CBCS books sell for really nice money, but on average, it seems like the CBCS books tend to sell for roughly about 10% less. Same book, same grade.
Okay.
So this GPA doesn't, it can't really tell you local sales. Like, you go to a store on the East Coast or you go to a store on the West Coast, it can't tell you those sales. And those sales can differ a lot because it may not be worth as much on the West Coast as on the East Coast. It's not going to give you those sales. It's just going to tell you what's online. So you don't really know the location of where these are coming from.
Exactly. One of the things I like about GPA is the GPA website is that it will track a sale of any grade. Again, it's only CGC graded comics. but it'll track sales way back to like 2000 or 2002, whenever CGC started. And they, well, again, the website, and I highly recommend that everybody subscribe to this, because I know a bunch of other people use it on a daily basis, not only to determine what you should sell your CGC graded comics for, but if you're interested in buying a CGC graded comic that's out there already, that's already been graded, you want to know what you should pay for it. You don't want to pay, obviously you want to pay the least you possibly can, but you want to know, if I buy this particular comic, does it typically sell for $100? Does it typically sell for $150? So GPA is a good way to find out both what to sell a comic for and what to buy a comic for.
And does that service cost any money?
Yeah, and that's another thing I was going to say. Again, the GPA website is comics.gpanalysis.com, and that service costs me like $10.95 a month.
Okay.
It's highly recommended that people invest in that. One of the things I wanted to talk about too, before I forget about it, is the fact that there are certain advantages in sending books to CGC versus CBCS. Now, typically, I would say any book you want to send in to either company, they're going to do a good job. They're going to be reliable. Both companies are very ethical. They're very professional. You can't go wrong with either company. But there is a particular case where I would recommend CBCS. Excuse me, where I'd recommend CBCS over CGC, and that is when a customer has a raw comic, or when I say raw, I mean an ungraded comic, where the comic has been signed by a particular artist or writer, and it's actually not been witnessed. And by being not witnessed, I mean you typically, to get the yellow signature series label from either CGC or CBCS, it has to be witnessed by one of their employees. And another thing that I do is I can act as a CBCS witness for people at Comic-Cons. Like if I happen to be at Dallas Comic-Con and I'm authorized to be a CBCS witness ahead of time, you can use me as that official witness, so that when your comics get signed at the show, we basically do the same thing. You have to sit down with me. I did it with Terry a couple of years ago at the Wizard World Tulsa, where he gave me 3 copies of New Mutants 98 that you had signed by Rob Liefeld, correct?
Well, we were going to sign by Rob Liefeld, but
that's
he wanted
correct.
to charge so much money for it.
Oh, and speaking of that, he's now up to 50.
It was 75 at the time of the show, yeah.
Okay, well, maybe it's $30 now, signature period. Anyway.
So that would mean it went down.
Well,
It was
I
like
think it's 30,
75,
maybe 75 for the New Mutants then. 30 for anything else now.
Yeah, he has a tier.
Yeah, he's tiering.
Yes.
But anyway, I can.
And that helps them by getting the red BSP label versus if they won CGC, it would come back qualified.
Yeah, and that's what I'm getting at is if you have a signed, unwitnessed comic, whether you have a certificate of authenticity or not, a lot of people think just because you have that certificate of authenticity that they will give you that yellow signature series label. It doesn't work that way. They literally, you can keep the COA at home. You don't even have to send it in with the book. If you do send it in, I believe they'll send it right back to you. But that doesn't give you the right to get a yellow signature series label. If you sent, let's say you had a copy of X-Men Unlimited #1, and it was signed by Stan Lee. I'm using this as a specific example because I have one. You have an X-Men Unlimited #1 that has not been graded yet, and it's signed by Stan Lee. At least you think it's Stan Lee's signature. I'm to the point now where I can recognize certain signatures and know whether it's Todd McFarlane or Stan Lee or Rob Liefeld, Dave Stevens, or certain signatures, you can tell, yes, that was the right person. That was the real person that signed it. If you sent that book to CGC, it's going to get what they call their green qualified label that we talked about before. That's another example of where you're going to get that green qualified label. And all CGC does, they don't even acknowledge the person who signed the comic. They will just state on the label, name written in ink on cover. It's just a generic statement that they put on there, and it'll get a green label. Whereas the one program that I love that CBCS has is they have their verified signature series program where you can send in an assigned unwitnessed book to them. And what they do is they take a high resolution scan of the signature, then they send it to, I believe it's CSA, that is the signature verification company. And CSA comes back and tells CBCS, yes, that is an official Stan Lee signature. You can go ahead and put it in your verified signature series label. That label, like Eric said, that label is red instead of yellow. But they verify through that process, they verified that Stan Lee was the one who actually did sign that. And to me, I would much rather have a red verified signature series CBCS label than just a green label from CGC that says name written in ink on the cover.
Right.
I think that the CBCS book would have more value, and you do pay an extra fee to do that. I believe it's $25 for the first signature, and it used to be $20 for a second. Let's say you had 2 or 3 signatures on one comic. It's $25 for the first signature, but now I believe it's only $15 for each additional signature after that. So if you had a comic with 2 signatures, it costs you an extra $40 over the standard grading fee. 3 would be $55, and so on. Okay. So you pay your standard grading fee. Let's say on a modern comic, it would be $18. You have to pay an additional $25 on top of that per signed comic that you send in. Okay. And I think I've got, every time I buy a raw signed comic that hasn't been witnessed, I've got a specific file cabinet that I put them in. I've probably got, probably 100, 150 of them now that eventually I'll send in a lot of them to have through the CBCS verified signature series program.
All right. We're running out of time here a little bit.
So, kind of to wrap up, if people need to contact you, best way is probably Facebook.
Facebook or email.
And that's Mike's Marvels LLC.
Yeah, MIKES MARVELS LLC @gmail.com.
Okay. So, got any other questions? You can click on the Comic Book Straight Talk Facebook page. This week's word, if you share, like the page, what's the word going to be? Should we do Mike's Marvels?
Let's do Mike's Marvels.
Mike's Marvels.
That's a great keyword.
Share the page, comment. Make sure you go to Mike's page. He's one of the best in the industry. Tickler and I and Captain, we've met tons of people that do the same thing he does. He's on our top 2, maybe even top 1. He's a good guy.
And you're the other one, right?
No. I don't verify nothing. So, anyway, to wrap up, I'm Eric the Knucklehead Eaton.
Terry, the French Tickler French.
Captain Dalian.
Mike Redmond with no nickname yet.
Mike Redmond.
Red. His nickname is Red.
Yep, Mike the Red. So don't forget